Hi, we're going to take a quick look at Lesson 18 in the Premier CC CIB book on exporting frames, clips, and sequences. Here's just some highlights that we're going to do over here. We're going to go over on page 436. It gives you an overview of export options. You already know this probably that you can export out your whole sequence. You can export out a single frame or a series of frames. You can choose to only export out the audio, just the video, or both. And you can take these exported clips or stills and bring them right back into a project if you want to use them again. You can also come down and export directly to videotape. We're not doing that. We're strictly sticking with digital. Beyond the actual exports, it says here you have some other options. You can choose to create files in a similar format and at the same visual quality and data rate as your original, which basically means you're exporting out a master copy of your sequence just like it's built. Or you can go ahead and pick a different means of compressing it, and so you could make it maybe a smaller size and maybe a little bit lower quality to meet your needs to put it up on maybe the web. You can also what's called transcode your media from one format to another to make it easier to exchange with people. It could be that you need to you've shot your original video and you want to transcode it or translate it, we could say, I guess, into maybe a YouTube format or a Vimeo format. And you can also go in and customize basically everything about it. The frame rate, the frame size, the data rate, all this can be tweaked to meet your specific needs. I'm just going to go in here and I'm on a sequence called Review Copy. I'm just going to put my mouse over a frame here and I'm going to export out just this frame. It's not really serious. I'm on the sequence window and I'm going to come over to actually the source panel. There's a little camera icon over here and I can click Export Frame. It's going to ask me to name this, and I'll name it Red Rock Car 1. And I'm going to go over here, and I can have different file formats to put it out a different way. Ping's probably my favorite format, and if I want to bring this right back into this project for some reason, I sure can. I'm going to browse a path to put this. I'm just going to put it on my desktop, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to click OK. So now it's exported out that frame. Another thing that we can do is we can come over and actually export out an exact master copy duplicate of our actual sequence. I'm going to click on the sequence to make that active, that panel active. I'm going to go under the file menu, and this is on page 439. I'm going to come over to export. I'm going to come over to media. And what we're going to do here, just to make an exact copy, is go in the upper right corner under the export settings. I'm just going to click Match Sequence Settings. And really the only thing I have to do with that is come down here, and there's a ability on this gold text here to click and give it a different name than my working name. I could just go ahead and just click export, and it would go through that process of exporting that out. Now, other things that you can do in here, I can come down here on this bottom of this left side, and it says source range. Now this you got to be a little bit careful of because it says work area. Now let me cancel out of here for a second. Back in Premiere, if I click on the sequence window and I hit the backslash key, notice there's this little bar right up here above all this render information, and there is these little tabs or little markers that I can drag around, and by default those span the length of all my clips. This is officially called the work area markers. So the theory is I could take these markers, and I'm going to say from this point to this point in my sequence, that's the only portion I want to export. This is called the work area. So this is the work area. This is the whole sequence. So now if I go over here and pick export, and I've changed those markers on that work area, that's the only area that's going to be exported. So you got to pay close attention to this if you ever go up there and start moving those markers around. Or if somebody else or you do it or whoever, and you export out the file, you know, well, wow, that really did it fast. How come I did it so fast? Or I export it out and I don't have the whole video. It could be because you've moved your work area markers in your project to something other than the length of the sequence. Now, if I notice that when I go in here before I export, I can pick source range and I can say entire sequence. I can actually go in there and go with the in and out points on the timeline, and I can also customize it. So pay attention to what you're seeing here, because that's what it's going to output. So just keep an eye on that. Let's see what else you can do here. You can also go out here and choose another codec to compress and decompress this possibly to a different format. Now I'm over here in the export settings. Over here is the format drop down. Now if I know I want to send it out to H.264, which is a really common universal format, I can pick H.264, and it's going to look at the source and the bit rate and everything else on my actual sequence, and it's going to use that information and output it as this encoding format. Now, you can also, if you have some courage, you can come down in this area where it says video, and you can come in here and uncheck these defaults and change them. Be careful. Also, it says here render at maximum bit depth or depth. This means if you are taking a piece of video that was shot on an iPhone and maybe it doesn't match the output size you want to use, maybe to go to YouTube or something else, then I'm going to turn on this render at maximum depth. It's going to take longer to render that, but it's going to improve the quality of it. So pretty much that's what it's all about. So I would sure turn that on. They also have those buttons down below here to use maximum render quality also. So there's lots of things in here to kind of take a look at. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and show you one more thing under output name. In addition to being able to change the name, you also are able to specify the location where this is output. So that's almost as important in changing the name if you need to. So know that you have this little output name feature, and if you click on it, you're allowed to change both the name and the location. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a second and we're going to come right back. Okay, we're back. I closed out of the export window to come back to the project. Now, the way I handle my exports is I usually am exporting or wanting to output a file to one of two places most of the time. Either YouTube, or I'm going to output it to put up on the web, or to put into Adobe InDesign for either an interactive document, PDF, or a digital publishing suite video. That is, putting a video into InDesign that's eventually going to be turned into an app to go play on a tablet. Now, the universal best codec quality file we can look at right now is a format of what's called H.264, and its format is an MP4 file. That will basically at this point in time play almost on every tablet, every computer that we've got. So it's kind of the universal format. So what I do when I want to export out something maybe to go to specifically to YouTube, or to that H.264 MP4 format. I'll click on my sequence. I'm going to go under File. I'm going to come down to Export. I'm going to come over to Media. Now, in the book, they're going to talk about what I'm going to talk about here. They go into more detail using the Adobe Media Encoder. This is on page 442. And this page 442 and 443, it's got a ton of stuff here. Continued over on 444. And it's going through information and telling you all these different formats you can export this out at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here on my source range, and I'm going to say I'm going to do the entire sequence. But what I'm going to do is I'm not going to pick my parameters from here. I'm going to come down and I'm going to pick the Q button. Now what this is going to do, it's going to save my project. It's going to open up the Adobe Media Encoder, which is automatically on your machine because you have Premiere. And it's going to load a reference to my sequence into the Adobe Media Encoder. And here it is. It's just now fired up. Now I'm going to make this bigger so you don't see the background of Premiere itself. In fact, let me just take Premiere and I'm just going to hide it. There. So let's just concentrate on this right here. So over on this left side, this is the sequence that I was working on. This is the one I sent to the queue to go into Media Encoder. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the name of that. That's important. You've got to click on it to specify that's the one you're going to add a different file format to export. I'm going to come over here on this right hand side, and this is, nothing short of intimidating. Now notice I can send out only the audio. That's one thing you might want to know about. Now I think most of the time this is expanded. So let me click on some of these things here. Here's one, broadcast H.264. So if I know that I want to send this out at a specific size and frame rate using the H.264 format, this is where I'm going to pick it. This is where I'm going to pick that file or that format. Now if I hover back over here, I notice this file is a 720p file. It's 1280 by 720 and it's at a 23.9 frame rate or 24 frames a second. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick HD 720p and look at some other options here. I want H.264. So I'm going to pick this because that matches almost dead on what I've got over here. So it should maintain the highest quality and keep that original size and frame rate. Now I'm going to double click on that. Now that adds it over here to the list of formats that this review copy sequence is going to be exported. Now maybe I want to come over and I want to also send this out for maybe use on YouTube. So I'm going to twiddle that little arrow here and I'm going to come down and notice there's one here specifically for YouTube. And I will scroll this so you can see it. And I'll make this a little bit wider. Okay. So now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick YouTube 720 24 frames per second because that's basically what my video is at. So it's going to take my video and tweak it so it's going to work the best on YouTube. I'm going to double click on that. Oh, wonder why it isn't moving. That's because I don't have the video sequence selected. And now if I double click, let's cross our fingers, it's going to add it over here. So be aware, you need to have that link of your video file clicked up there because you may have more than one linked video file in this queue. You don't just have to work with one. Now there's one more thing I'm going to do here. I'm going to come over and I'm going to click on this original one that it came in with. Whoops, cancel that. I'm going to select it right here, not click on here. I'm going to select it here, and I really don't want this output this way. So I'm going to come over here to minus and remove. It says, are you sure you want to do this? Remember, removing items from this queue will not remove the files from your computer. It's just not going to output another copy in that specific format. So that's not a problem. You're always going to probably come in with one, and you're not going to use it. You're going to pick the other format you want to go with. Other things up in here are image sequence. Let's see what else is here. So there's lots of options up here. So if I wanted to send out an image sequence, maybe to go into my InDesign DPS project, I can say I'm going to send out an image sequence. I'm going to make them all pings, and I'm going to use a certain size and so on and so forth to do that. So I could double click. Let's say I'm going to do this one. Now, if you come over here, there's a little drop down arrow. So you could change things on these certain codecs here. If I click on the codec name, I can come back into here, and I'm going to take this little thumb driver here and move it in so I can see some video, because this fades up from black. So know that you can come back in here, and then I can turn on other things to tweak. These are additional options. Up here, maybe I don't want it this size. Maybe I have a specific size I want to use it in my project. So let's say I'm going to change the height to 360. Okay, now if I click OK, this is going to be output as a custom. So basically what we're ending up with here, in fact, I apologize, I shouldn't have had this image sequence picked, so let me just get rid of it. Okay, I'm going to use the H.264 codec or format. I'm going to click on here, and what I want to do is I want to change the frame size of this. I want to use the parameters, but I don't want to use the size. So I'm going to render at maximum depth. I'm going to maximum quality here. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change my size to 360. And you can see I'm actually going in here and doing this by halves or quarters. I'm not doing weird amounts like 200 or something like that. I'm trying to hit something that's an easy increment of division for Premiere and the Media Encoder to work with. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now this becomes a custom. This became a custom. So now if I wanted another one of my YouTubes, I'd click on the review copy sequence. I'd come down here and find my YouTube drop down, and I'll pick the 720 24 frames. Okay, now what's going to happen is I'm going to resize this window a little bit here to see if you can see this hit my desktop, and I'm not sure you will. But up here in the upper middle it says Start Queue. So now what it's going to do, it's going to start chewing through the sequence and applying these different formats automatically. So it's doing all this for me in the background. In theory, I guess you could probably go back to work on your computer, depending on how fast it is. This may be something I want to do just before I go to lunch, or maybe just before I go home, is to start this queue up and let it run. So you can see on the screen over here, it's giving me a little preview of how it's looking as it goes through this format change. While that's doing that for a couple minutes, let's see here. Additional options for the media encoder is more explanations on page 448 and 449. Page 450, I want you to know about this at the very top of the page here. This is really important if you have to do a lot of these. it says you can use a watched folder. It says if you'd like to automate some encoding tasks, you can create a watch folder and then assign a preset to that watch folder. Anytime source files are dragged into the folder later, they will automatically be encoded to that format or formats specified. So let's say you have a bunch of videos, and as you're working on them, you want to send them over to this watch folder so that Premiere can start working on them in the background to get them ready to go up to YouTube. So you can build this watched folder. In theory, if you had a lot of computers at your disposal, you could have one computer just doing rendering out of videos all the time, where you would set up the encoder on that machine, set up a watch folder on that machine, and just move files over to that via the network, maybe, and just have that machine chug on those files. Also, again, back to the screen here, in this lower corner of the output window, it says elapsed and remaining. These are guesstimated times on how long it's going to take to complete this procedure. So take these with a grain of salt. It varies what the frames are in the video, so this number may change dramatically either way. I hope that gives you a little more confidence in using the media encoder. I really prefer it than just going in and exporting out and going to the export window, because I just find it easier to find the codecs I need and the different items in the media encoder. Once you get this set the way you want, boy, write down these things so the next time you have to do it, you just know exactly what to go in and pick, and then rock and roll. Thank you very much.